Welcome to Look Ahead Radio with Tom Arms and Lockwood Phillips.
Joining us in a few moments will be Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio, and we'll be looking ahead, well, the week ahead, but also viewpoints around the world. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today because I want to find out about apparent, well, I think we'd call it apparent envy, metal envy among the European Union. So just stay tuned with us for that in a few moments. We're going to have him joining us live from London, as a matter of fact. You can call in with a question and observation. Don't hesitate. He's an adult. He can handle it. If you don't agree with him, the numbers, 252 area code 247-7282. That's 247-7282. 910 area code 353-4674. That's 353-4674. Toll free 800-818-2255. Via email at viewpoints with an S, viewpointsradio@hotmail.com. Via Facebook at Viewpoints on the talk stations. And, of course, as always, to remind you about our sponsors, Floyd's 1921 restaurant located at 4th and Bridges Street in beautiful uptown Morehead City. And, of course, Advanced Water Systems, the people that bring you Connecticut, folks that are, well, practically reinventing water. But feel free to give us a call this afternoon here on the program. Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio joining us with viewpoints around the world. And with that, Tom, good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening, Lockwood.
We're going to get to the metal envy in a few minutes, but let's start by first finding out what's the weather like in London. And don't tell me it's going to be beautiful.
It's too hot.
How hot is it? How
hot? It's touching 90. I think it's past 90.
Oh, my goodness.
You have to look out. You might trip on, melted Britons on the sidewalk. They don't take to the heat very well. I certainly don't.
Well, now, you were having beautiful weather last time we chatted.
And it's been beautiful. There were a couple days. My wife and I went off to the coast for the weekend. There have been a couple days when we had gale force winds, and about half a dozen or so people have been swept out to sea, never to be seen again, or at least not alive, because we had quite stormy weather. But we have not had any rain to speak of.
You said that you'd had a drought. It
has stayed dry.
Yeah, you've had a drought. Is this unusual?
This time of year, it's starting by now, starting to get a little bit cooler. So it's beginning to look as if we might have an Indian summer.
Now, wait a second. You don't have Indians in Britain, unless they're India from the subcontinent of India.
You are laboring under a false semantic impression, and that is that the expression Indian summer refers to America. It doesn't. It's a British expression.
Oh, really?
And refers to summer in India.
Well, hey, we have been enlightened. That's what
you might also be interested to know that the expression "white man's burden," which is often referred to as explaining British colonialism, actually refers to American colonialism in the Philippines, and it was coined by the British writer Rudyard Kipling.
Wow. See, that's one of the joys of chatting with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio. Tom, before we go to the break, let's talk about the election in London. Your wife was running for office. The campaign ended, I guess, last Thursday. When was the vote taken? Was it Thursday or Friday?
It was on Thursday. It was on Thursday, and she didn't win. We didn't expect her to win. It was a rock-solid Labour seat. And the last time that Liberal Democrats contested the seat, they came in fourth place. This time they came in third place, and she doubled her share of the vote.
Wow.
So in that respect, she did extremely well, because the purpose of her campaigning was to send a message that there are a lot of people who still feel very strongly about Europe. The Liberal Democrats are campaigning day and night to reverse the Brexit vote. And so basically what she was trying to do was to increase the size of the Liberal Democrat vote in a safe Labour seat in order to send that message to 10 Downing Street and also to the Labour Party leader.
And curious, what is the mood there in the United Kingdom, predominantly there in London, over Brexit? Is there any movement, sort of remorse that the decision has been passed, or?
Not yet. And I'm not saying there will be, but we haven't started any negotiations. We have no idea. Nobody has any idea what is going to follow on from the Brexit vote. There are no details as such.
With this, the economic fallout, but of course, it's interesting. Even here in the United States, the feeling is that the world is going to continue to revolve and rotate both, and things are just going to continue on. Is there a possible sort of a calm approach to this, that there was a period of time that everyone was sort of running out of fear?
And I think they're still fearful, but they're waiting. It is summer. Nothing happens in August. Nothing happens. Everyone is on vacation, except me, because I have to be here to talk to you.
Well, Grant.
But everyone else is on vacation. There is nothing happening. There was a meeting of the Italian, French, and German leaders this week. I think that's on our discussion. Should we leave that for later?
We'll leave that for later. We're going to take a quick break because I also want to chat with you related to the EU, and that, of course, is the metal envy that I read about earlier this week. We have this afternoon with us Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio with viewpoints around the world.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
This is Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio's World Report for the week beginning the 29th of August. Look Ahead broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. The week ahead is geared to preparations for the G20 summit in Hangzhou, China, which starts on Sunday. Secretary of State John Kerry is off to India and Bangladesh, while Russian, Japanese, Chinese and South Korean leaders hold their own Far Eastern Economic Summit before heading to Hangzhou. President Obama flies into Beijing 2 days before the summit for a tete-a-tete with President Xi Jinping. European leaders are putting the final touches on an EU position. In Latin America, it's crunch week for suspended Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff as her impeachment trial draws to a close. The final vote by the Senate is expected late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning. Cuban-American transport links receive a big boost this week when the airline JetBlue launches cheap Miami-Havana flights on Wednesday. Its competitor, Silver Airways, starts its flights to Havana the following day. In Europe, the Estonian parliament votes on a new president this week, while the Spanish parliament, the Cortes, decides whether or not to give Mariano Rajoy a second term as prime minister. In Britain next week, there will be an anti-Brexit march through London. In the Balkans, Kosovo's parliament is on Thursday expected to vote on a controversial border agreement with Montenegro, which will transfer 312 square miles of Kosovo territory. And finally, for all you lovers of Peter Rabbit, a long-lost manuscript from the pen of Peter's creator, Beatrix Potter, has been discovered. It's expected to be published next week under the title of The Tale of Kitty in Boots. And that was next week's news today, so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned after this message for the expanded Look Ahead World Analysis.
They say the best things in life are free. So, hey, why are we paying so much for our basic information and entertainment needs? The average cable TV bill has more than doubled in the last 10 years. The price of movie tickets keeps going up. So, exactly what is free today anyway? Well, you're listening to it. Local radio. Support the advertisers that support this radio station. And keep listening. We won't send you a bill. There are still some things you just shouldn't have to pay for.
This is Tom Arms with Look Ahead Radio's expanded world analysis for the week beginning the 29th of August. Look Ahead broadcasts tomorrow's news today so that you can plan to participate. It's Summit Week. Leaders across the globe are putting their heads together to prepare for the G20 summit in Hangzhou, China, which starts on Sunday. Secretary of State John Kerry is flying to India at the start of the week to talk about trade deals and secure summit backing from Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. On Friday, President Putin, Japanese Premier Shinzo Abe, South Korean President Park Geun-hye, and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi gather in Vladivostok for their own Far Eastern Economic Summit to develop a pan-Asian position for the G20 meeting. During this meeting, China and Russia are expected to sign a major trade deal. President Obama arrives in Beijing 2 days early for private pre-summit talks with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. These are expected to focus on the South and East China Seas, the Sino-American trade balance, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. The formal summit itself will focus on the impact of Britain's decision to leave the European Union and how to resist growing populist pressures opposing free trade. But as with most big summits, the real meat is in the bilaterals. This will be the first G20 summit for Putin since he walked out of the 2014 summit in Australia. He will face tough questioning over the Ukraine from Obama and European leaders. China will come under attack over the South China Sea and state subsidies for its steel industry. And Britain and Europe will be quizzed over post-Brexit plans. Conspicuous by her absence will be suspended Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff. It's crunch week for her impeachment trial. On Tuesday, she will be given 30 minutes to address the Senate on the charges that she illegally moved government money from different accounts. Then, either late on Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, the Senate will vote on whether or not to formally remove Ms. Rousseff from office. In Europe, Spain's Conservative leader Mariano Rajoy is seeking a vote of confidence next week that will confirm him in a second 4-year term as Prime Minister. The powerful Spanish Socialist Party has vowed to vote against him. Spain has been effectively without a government for nearly 9 months, despite 2 general elections to try and break the deadlock. If Senior Rajoy fails next week, another election is on the cards. Expect political fireworks in the Balkans next week as the Parliament of Kosovo votes on a deal to hand 312 square miles of land to neighboring Montenegro. The deal was agreed through international arbitration, but the Kosovan opposition parties have vowed to fight it every step of the way. And that was next week's News Today, so that you can plan to participate in the world around you. Stay tuned for Viewpoints Around the World with myself and Lockwood Phillips.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms. And I know I've got a caller standing by. I want to chat with Tom, though, before I even get into the other conversations. We were chatting with him a few moments ago about the issue of the euro and Brexit. And I read last week, Tom, and by the way, congratulations to the Brits. Number 2 in the medal race for the Olympics, if I read my numbers correctly.
They're over the moon. They're over the moon. Celebrations all over the place.
Beat out the Russians and other...
Beat out the Chinese.
Yeah.
We are a small country. 60 million people. You've got 6 times our population. China has 30 times the population of Britain.
Well, just shows what a little money will do for athletes and athlete prowess. Let's talk...
I think you also have to say some hard work as well.
Well, no question about it. But the difference is that you had those professional coaches and facilities that you initiated following which Olympics?
1996.
Okay, Atlanta, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now,
1 gold medal.
2 things to make mention of. Number 1, the dismal reaction and participation by the public on the Olympics, particularly in the TV sector. How well received were the Olympics this year, particularly in UK and with its success, but also in Europe? How well received were the Olympics?
People weren't all that happy with the Brazilians. There were always little snide comments about the Brazilians. Okay. But, the green pool and everything else. The fact that whenever you seemed to turn on the television, there was nobody sitting in the Olympic Stadium.
Right.
It didn't go over very well. It's made worse by the fact that they are cutting back on the Paralympics, and for the British in particular, that's very important. Okay. The British founded the Paralympics and have been pushing it from its founding, and they did a really good job in the 2012 of the Paralympics, and they'd hoped that they'd kick-started it finally to the top level of elite sports. Mm-hmm. And now the Brazilians, they feel, have let people down.
The other aspect of this, and of course, we've seen some interesting stories associated with the efforts of the Brazilians, partly the time of the year. It was so late in the summer. And then the other aspect of it, and give the Brazilians kudos and props, having won the soccer match, which, of course, had to be a blow to the Germans. Now, one other aspect of this, there apparently was some discussion among the European leaders that the European Union, should be the recipients or take credit for the medals won by the Brits. What was the reaction? I love that story.
No. You've got it wrong, Lockwood.
No. I've got it right.
There was a tweet put out by the European Parliament, which has virtually no power at all. And it was just a tweet which said, "Well done, European athletes." And it had a graphic with it, which showed the European athletes with, 326 medals, and the Chinese with however many they got. And I think the United States got 121 or something like that. Right. I can't remember. And it was just a tweet.
Well,
that's all it was. It wasn't even, it was reported by about 2 newspapers here in the UK.
Well, they just
That's
passed,
all. It wasn't reported by television or radio or anyone like that.
Well, wait. It is being reported by radio, by this radio, and by you from LookAhead Radio, as a matter of fact. All right, I want to move on. I just find it, I found it both interesting, and I thought, well, this is just a twist of the nose to the Brits for having passed Brexit.
I think it was a faux pas.
No. All right. We've got a caller standing by. Let's go to our Artillery in Jacksonville. Artillery, good evening. Welcome. And of course.
Hey, good evening. How you doing, gentlemen? Sorry about the election, Mr. Arms. I wanted to vote. I tried to vote. Do you need an ID to vote over there in England?
Your vote would have been really appreciated. Yeah. And the thought, it's great to hear.
But no, wait. The question was, do you need an ID to vote in England?
No.
Oh.
What they do is, I'll tell you what they do. Here's what they do. Before the election, it's a sort of ID. Before the election, well, first of all, you have to have an ID to put your name on what's called the electoral roll.
Oh. Huh.
Okay? And then, and that is tied to your address. And then before the election, they send you a polling card. And you have to take that polling card to the polling station to vote.
All right, that just goes to show, Artillery, yes, they do require some form of identification. Excellent question. Continue on, Artillery.
Hey, one more thing. Thank you for finally running the subway 24 hours a day.
How true.
I know. I thought that was great. I'm really looking forward to taking that when I finally wake up.
One more thing real quick. Thank you so much, you people, for Shakespeare, Beatles, and Jane Austen.
Oh, okay. Thanks very much, Artillery.
Thank you for George Washington.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Thanks again. You've got it. By the way, Artillery called it the subway. It's called the underground, but I appreciate that. Let's move on to some.
We understand subway.
Well, okay. Let's move on to some items here before we go to the next break. This is some issues here that I think are very important. You touched on this a few moments ago. The EU in talks about greater deference, cooperation in post-Brexit world. You had the leaders of Italy, Germany, and was it France that gathered together recently and decided they would do all that they could to promote the EU. And interestingly enough, I did not realize this, but they recognized the author, if you will, of the concept. And
yes.
Let's talk about that briefly.
Well, he was a prisoner of war on the island of Ventotene, and he's buried there. And so they laid a wreath on his grave. Mm-hmm. There have been several people who've sort of claimed authorship. It wasn't just one person. There was Spinelli and there was Monet and several other people. They all came to the conclusion that the only way you could prevent another war in Europe was by making it economically interdependent.
Now, by the way, was he not he was in the prison? He was in a German prison at the time, was he not?
Yeah, a German prisoner of war camp, yes.
Yep. So, all right, real quickly before we go to this next break, what is the future of the EU when it comes to EU when it comes to those countries? Are they going to what are their plans to strengthen it?
Well, for a start, they decided that they don't want to really bring on any new members. So sorry, Turkey. I think you're just going to have to wait for a long time. They think that they've got to concentrate on creating greater union between the existing members.
Okay.
There are differences over economic policy. The Italians and the French, along with the Greeks and the Spaniards, but in particular in this case, the Italians and the French are the two big ones here, want to have greater investment by the European Union in European infrastructure.
All right, we're going to get back to that.
The Germans, however,
to
want to keep the public debt.
All right, we're going to get back to that in a moment here on Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
As I went through school, one giant question loomed over me. What did I want to be? First, I had to decide what I wanted to make. I wanted to make more, so I became a teacher. Now I make learning a privilege, not a chore, and frustration a tool, not an obstacle. I make working hard seem easy, and giving up impossible. I'm a teacher. I make more.
Find out how you can make more at teach.org. Make more. Teach. Brought to you by Teach and the Ad Council.
We now return to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio. And Tom, we have another caller standing by. I'm going to ask Chan to bear with us for a moment. I want to continue our conversation here briefly on the future of the EU. And you mentioned Turkey a few moments ago. I want to bring up that topic as well. Chan, do stay with us because we're going to get to tourism here in a few moments. Since the EU, of course, is looking to solidify its existence, we talked a few moments ago about a recent meeting this week, as a matter of fact, if I recall correctly, among three national leaders, and the purpose, well, to strengthen and move forward with the European Union. The topic then goes to the impact on Turkey, and we can bring up several items on Turkey that we have a few moments with. You said that the plan is not to expand the European Union. Now, if the United Kingdom were to change its mind and become a member of the EU again, which it was, well, if you will, partially a member, it didn't have all the responsibilities of it as a European Union member, still believed in and still utilized the pound, and I might add the foot. And the measurements have been historic to the United Kingdom. So, if Britain were to rejoin the European Union, would the EU accept this opportunity?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. That's the whole thing. Nobody knows. It's just this great political uncertainty.
Okay. All right. Well, what about the future of Turkey in this case? And let's talk about Turkey and its involvement in Syria as well, and maybe its relationship with Russia. But what about Turkey? If Turkey is not going to be accepted in the European Union, might this further the gulf between the European community and Turkey?
Yes, I think it would. And President Erdogan has certainly been trying to move Turkey more towards the Islamic world and away from Europe. So he would continue that drift. There's no doubt about that. Now, talking about the fighting, I think that the fact that the border has just been crossed by Turkish tanks is a major development in the Syrian civil war. You haven't had to date, other than the Syrian government forces, you have not had boots on the ground. The Russians, the French, the Americans, the British, it's been airstrikes and the occasional special forces. There hasn't been any major attempt to put boots on the ground to occupy the areas which they drive the ISIS forces out of. And so Turkey is the first one to do that.
Now, is this a fight against the the various groups that are fighting Assad, or is this fighting Assad? And of course, we've also got to bring up the recent terrorist attack in Turkey at a wedding that was really quite brutal. I think it was this past weekend.
Yes. Certainly that was the straw that broke the camel's back as far as Erdogan was concerned, at least public opinion. He had to respond to that. Now, what is he fighting against? He's fighting against two things. He's fighting against ISIS, and he's also fighting against the Kurds, who are trying to split off part of Turkey and form a Kurdish state, which includes parts of Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. Now, the Kurds have been supported by the West, except for Turkey. So it's very complicated, but he's fighting both ISIS and the Kurds are fighting ISIS and Assad and being supported by the United States and Europe. Have you got all that?
Yeah,
listeners, have you got all that?
Yeah, you got a scorecard. That's impressive. Let's talk about Russia very quickly, and then I want to move to tourism in France. What is the relationship between Turkey and Russia? And of course, now Russia has been asked to leave ostensibly Iran after its announcement that braggadocio in many regards of having initiated airstrikes from an airport facility in Iran. What's the role of Russia in all of this?
Well, I mean, the Russians are very close to Assad, as we know, and they have a very close relationship with Iran. But obviously, there are a lot of people in Iran who don't like the relationship which President Rouhani has struck with President Putin. They were only there for a week,
right.
But Putin and Rouhani have been meeting on and off for the past year, and they have been working together to develop a strategy in Syria and in the Middle East as a whole.
You know, Russia has been very active of late. All right, let's move back to Europe. I want to go to the experience there in France, and then I'm going to bring Jan from Beaufort on. Tourism down in France because of terrorism?
Absolutely. 19% fewer Americans are going to France. They're coming to London. You know, they're spending their money here, which is great. But, you know, the French need your help, too. It should be pointed out, by the way, that you're more likely to be crushed by your television, statistically speaking, than you are to be killed by a terrorist.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, they've had a very bad press. They've had 14 attacks in the past 2 years. And it just gets worse and worse. The French, I think, in some respects are not helping by overreacting. For instance, next month there's a huge flea market, which happens every year in the city of Lille. And 2.5 million people went to it last year. It's been cancelled. It's been cancelled because of security concern.
Wow.
There's a big European road cycling championship, which was supposed to take place in the south of France, I think in Nice. That was going to attract a lot of people. It's been cancelled because of security concerns. So, you know, the idea of carrying on regardless is not in the French mentality, it would seem.
Okay. But since we're talking tourism, a topic came up several weeks prior with Jan from Beaufort. She's calling in with a question. Again, this is Britain in bloom, as a matter of fact. And Jan, good afternoon. And, of course, your guest this afternoon you'll be chatting with, Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio. Yes, ma'am.
Tom Arms, I am so pleased to hear you every week. I look forward to it so much.
Well, thank you, Jan.
And I just was wondering, I had the pleasure of going to Britain and Scotland when they were having their Britain in Bloom contest. And I was just curious, who won this year?
You know, I just don't know. I'll find out, and I'll let Lockwood know, and he'll put it up on his Facebook page.
We will. I might add that we were just looking at it, and we've got the if you will, the finalists in various categories in England right now. Large villages, small city, large towns, and a variety of categories. So we will post that on our Facebook page, Jan, because it's a great story, and a lot of people are not aware of this. By the way, Jan, when were you there to see Britain in Bloom?
Actually, I hate to say it, it's been 20 years ago.
Wow.
But it was the highlight of my visit there, and everybody that had 4 square feet of front yard, they had everything in bloom. It was you cannot imagine unless you've seen it. It was amazing.
Jan, thank you very much for the call. I appreciate that. We will be following up on this. Thanks again. Appreciate the compliment.
Thank you.
I should add that most front yards are 4 square feet.
That's right. All right, I'm going to take a very quick change in structure. We've got about a minute and a half, Tom. The reshuggle coming up in Russia and China. I've mentioned Russia. Let's talk about China very quickly. I like that. The reshuggles of, or is that reshuffle of Russia, of China and Russia. What's happening there?
Well, it would seem that there's going to be, especially in China, there's going to be a major reshuffle within the Politburo.
Okay.
They're on their holiday at the moment. They all head off to the beach where they all the party leaders head off to a special beach about 100 miles from Beijing. And when they come back, the President Xi Jinping is going to be announcing a major reshuffle. Now, the idea is that he really wants to hold on to power for as long as possible. And so anyone who is considered in any way to be a threat to his power, in any way could challenge him, will probably be removed. And they could end up in prison, because what he tends to do is just simply say, you're guilty of corruption. And of course, they probably all are.
That brings me up to another topic very quickly. The corruption we're seeing in the United States and the status of the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. We don't have enough time to get into that before we go to this break. I want to bring that up very quickly. I'm glad you brought up the topic of corruption. And we're asking questions about, I think it was, I did the calculations. It worked out to almost $7 million per a visit from 56 individuals or groups, non-government individuals who were wanted to have an audience within Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. I'm curious, how is that being played in Europe? We'll find out about that in just a moment with Tom Arms here on Viewpoints Around the World. And then we've got a few other very interesting stories. We've also got to touch on Italy. And then I see an interesting story about British identical twin brothers with a fascinating story on that one. Stay with us here on Viewpoints Around the World with Tom Arms.
Look Ahead Radio will return in just a moment.
Hi, I'm Julia Roberts.
And I'm Bruce Willis.
In 1988, our dear friend Paul Newman had a vision, a place where kids with serious illnesses could just be kids.
So he founded a camp, and the joy of playing, laughing, and simply belonging had a profound effect.
Freeing the children to reach beyond their illnesses and discover new strength.
From that one camp, the Serious Fun Children's Network has grown, serving 30,000 kids globally every year.
At no cost to their families.
Learn more about the Serious Fun camp closest to you. Visit victoryjunction.org.
Observations of an Expat by Tom Arms. A society is judged by its treatment of those less able than the accepted norm. Rio, you've been judged lacking. I'm not talking about green diving pools or empty Olympic stadium seats. All those issues pale into insignificance compared to your plans for the staging of the Paralympics starting on the 7th of September. Despite your economic and political problems, you did a good job for the able-bodied Olympians. But you've destroyed any right to justifiable pride with your plans for the Paralympians. The workforce has been downsized, travel grants have been cut, the facilities at Diodoro Park have been dismantled, and media centers closed. Perhaps worst of all, you've closed or downgraded many of the transport facilities for the athletes. Paralympians may be able to whiz around the track, but their wheelchairs have difficulty making it across town to reach the starting line on time. The Paralympics have probably done more than any other event to raise the disabled from freak status to that of valued members of society. But it has been a long, hard struggle. The Paralympian movement had its origins in post-war Britain and the work of a German-Jewish refugee neurosurgeon called Ludwig Guttmann. He was a true medical hero. Dr. Guttmann was put in charge of a spinal injuries unit at Stoke Mandeville Hospital outside London and soon learned the value of sport as a means of improving both the psychological and physical health of young men turned by bombs into paraplegics. In 1948, the Olympics came to London, and Dr. Guttmann persuaded the organisers to let him demonstrate his patient's abilities at the opening ceremony. The event was an instant success, as the hearts of the British crowd went out to their injured war heroes. The result was the annual Stoke Mandeville Games, which by 1952 was attracting 130 international competitors. The first official Paralympics were held after the Rome Olympics in 1960, but the International Paralympic Committee did not become official until 1989. It is separate from the International Olympic Committee, although they are clearly linked in their basic aim of improving society through sport. It was not until 2001 that it was agreed that any host city bid for the Olympics had to include staging the Paralympics. Television coverage of the Paralympics was almost non-existent till the Sydney Olympics of 2000. U.S. coverage has been among the worst. NBC secured the U.S. broadcast rights for the 2012 Paralympics, but broadcast only 5 hours, and that was on its pay channel. It was in London in 2012 where the Paralympics reached their zenith. No expense was spared, and the British people truly rose to the occasion. For me, the spirit of those 2012 Paralympics was summed up by a women's doubles table tennis match. The sport is dominated by the Chinese, but this game for the bronze medal was between Italy and Great Britain. The players were wheelchair-bound cerebral palsy victims. The crowd of about 1,000 was packed into the table tennis hall with a partition wall and wooden stands. As you can imagine, there was strong support for the British team. There was no question of slamming the plastic ball across the table. It was a major effort for these women to place their rackets under the white spheroid and gently tap it up and over the net. Play was agonizingly slow, but that didn't matter. 2 British women athletes were about to win a bronze medal for their country. Not 2 cerebral palsy victims, but 2 athletes. The British pair quickly fell behind, but the crowd refused to let them stay there. They shouted, they screamed, they stamped their feet and roared. The stands, the walls, the entire room literally shook. The British women fed off the frenzy and won by 2 points. It was, as all great athletic events should be, truly inspiring.
Welcome back to Look Ahead Radio. Here is Lockwood Phillips.
Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107 AM 1240. Look Ahead Radio host Tom Arms, our guest this afternoon, with viewpoints around the world. Tom, so many things to talk about. Very quickly, just to touch on this, and I don't want to take a lot of time. The discussions recently and the discoveries of the Association of Major Donors and the Clinton Foundation, and also her access to the Secretary of State. Is that getting any play in Europe and in the UK by any chance? Just headline news. Are you seeing anything?
No.
Wow. Okay, we will not.
No. But you know, you might be interested to know. I'm trying to set up a debate here between the Republican and Democratic parties, a public debate because there are 500,000 Americans who live here in the UK, and the Democrats are quite keen to be in debate, but the Republicans aren't because they don't support Trump. Well, the Republican Party here in London, and there is something called Republicans Abroad, do not support Donald Trump. In fact, there are three different Republican parties, if you like, set up here in the UK, different branches, and none of them support Trump.
Well, the interesting thing is we are now getting news related to Secretary Clinton's activities and her relationship and those of her various connections. We'll not belabor that today, but I think what you've just shared with me is an important story. Let's talk briefly about the earthquakes in Italy. Quite a stunning story which broke this morning. What do you hear, and what is happening in general there in Europe?
Well, it's a disaster area. It's I think I can't remember what the latest toll is, but it's been described on television here as a war zone. Italy has a history of earthquakes.
Right.
There's a fault line which runs right down the middle of Italy from north to south. And then halfway along that fault line, there's another fault line which goes east to west. And so it is really the country in Europe which gets more earthquakes than anywhere else. And it's had some really bad ones. Well, I mean, where thousands of people have died. There was one in 1915 where 32,610 people died, and one in 1908 in Messina where there 70,000 deaths. And even in recent times, there was one in 1980 where 3,000 people died.
So this is not a total surprise. All right, I want to move from that very sad and frightening experience to something that's really quite pleasant and quite astounding. We have twins and births. Tell us about this very quickly.
Two identical British twins, Steve and David Bissett. They're both 28 years old. Of course, they're both 28 years old. They're identical twins. And they gave, or their wives, I should say, gave birth to girls on exactly the same day, August the 11th. One was at 6:15 a.m. and the other at 8:45 p.m. The
chances of that happening are amazing.
I know what the chances are, because they went to the bookies afterwards and asked, what odds would you have given us? And they said 150,000 to 1. So if they had just bet $20, they'd both be millionaires.
Easily 3 times over, as a matter of fact. No, that is amazing. That I think that would be a wonderful story. 150,000 to 1, and twins, and these are the fathers, and their wives gave them daughters on the same day.
That's right.
Were they? I've got to ask. Were they married on the same day by any chance?
No, they were married within about a month of each other, if I recall correctly.
All right. Okay. All right, Tom. It's been a pleasure, as always. Tom Arms of Look Ahead Radio. You hear his Look Ahead program here every Friday evening on the talk station, and of course around the country. It's being aired by stations around the nation and around the world. And of course, he is also working on a blog.
Look Ahead Radio is a production of the Talk Station.